Okay, let's start. Assalamu alaikum everyone. I hope you all are doing great. And I thank you for taking out the time and joining this new feature launch for June 2022. I am Saman Farooq, and I'll be hosting the session along with my team members, Zoha and Saman, Ali, and Salman. So I'd first like to talk about the logistics of this event. For those who are new there are a few old attendees. They know the progression of this event, but I'll still reiterate on the logistics. So basically, everyone who's joining in, please try to keep your mics at mute at all times. And we'll be taking the questions at the end of the session. And you may even if you have any questions during the event, you may type them in the chat. And then we'll be answering those at the end of the session. Okay, so I'll repeat, please keep your mics at mute at all times. Okay, so just to brief you about the event, this event basically covers all the features that we've launched and we've worked on in the past month. June is the date when we release them. So just to give you about some insights of what value we're creating in Salesflo, we take this event and we try to explain the value addition that we've done. We also give you a demo of how to use these new features. And then if you're interested in using these features, you can ask your respective customer success person and get all these features activated on your Salesforce portal. A few features are at default, they'll be available to you, but some are setting based, so you will have to ask your as customer success person to get them turned on the instance. Okay, so this was just a brief introduction about what this event is. Just to give you a recap, we have these sessions monthly. So just to give you a recap of what our last webinar was and what it covered. So we announced some exciting new features. One of the features that we launched in the previous webinar was our return on investment calculator. We gave a detailed demo of how distributions and companies can view their ROIs by logging in their expenses, etc. So it was a very detailed module that we covered last time. We also talked about some updates in our mobile application that we introduced, and we'll be talking about them in this event as well. Okay. So just to give you an idea of what our innovation pipeline looks like, what things we are working on, what things we have planned on working. So this is just a rough idea of, so this is the 5th June, 5th July and the 5th August pipeline. So we'll be talking about these updates in this webinar. Moving on, talking about the agenda. So the first part of the agenda is that we'll be talking about web application features followed by their demos. So there are 3 features that we'll be talking about, followed by mobile application features and its demo. And then lastly, we'll be talking about our system improvements that we've done. And we'll be just verbally talking about them since these are minor, so we usually don't give a demo for them. But if there are any but if you still want to discuss them in detail, we discuss them after the session. Okay, so let's move on to our first part of the agenda, that is the web app feature demos. Okay. So the first feature that we've worked on is that SDR module. For those who have been using our system for a very long time, must be very familiar with our stock damage and return module. So we've revamped it a bit such that your discounts and your invoices are fetched automatically. It also reduces your chances of error since invoices are being automatically fetched by the system. So you won't have to enter any detail. The system will be fetching it for you. In the demo, we will be talking about and showing you as well the previous SDR feature and the new SDR feature. How is it different? And so this is a setting based feature. So any person who wants to turn this on can use it. Otherwise, they can simply turn it off. So I'll hand over the session to Zoha, and she will be talking about this feature in more detail and showing you how this particular feature works. Okay, over to you, Zoha.
All right. Thank you, Saman. I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay. So before I get into the SDR module, I'd like to talk about the previous module and what SDR module actually does, because some of you might not be using the module, which is our stock damage return module. So this is a module not used by all the customers. Some of the customers use this. They also have the values that of the stock damage return module perpetuate into the claims module. So they claim the damage amount. Some of the customers use this, some of them don't. So what this module actually does is that it logs your damages and returns, and it also provides a negative invoice on that shop. Now this is something that our team is working on. So the second part, where the invoice where we have a negative invoice on behalf of that shop, this is something that we'll be working on, and we'll be giving a separate entire demo for this particular feature. Today, we're going to focus on the part where we log the stock damage return, right? So those of you who are familiar with the module would know that there are two ways that we can, through which we can log the damages. One is through the web application, and one is through the mobile application. So what essentially happens is that whenever a retailer wants to return a particular SKU or any product that the retailer has brought, they go to the order booker. I'm sorry, I just. Okay. So whenever there is a retailer who comes in and says, I have this material, this SKU that I need to return, they go to the order booker. The order booker essentially visits the retailers and logs the damages into the application. Now what happens is that those logs go to the web application, and we have the entire SDR approval process. Now this is one part of the SDR module, right? You log it through the mobile application. Another part of the SDR module is that when a distributor logs it through the web screen, right? So my colleague Salman will be talking about the part where you use the mobile application to log the SDR. I'll be walking you through the web application through which we log SDR. Now you guys must be wondering that we already have a screen where we log SDRs, right? So I'll briefly walk you through what the screens currently look like. That is, this is the stock damage return module, right? So if you want to raise a request for the stock returns, you go on to adding a new, you're raising a stock return request. So you go to add new, you select a distributor, you put in the app user, you put in the invoice detail as well as a batch number. Now you see invoice number and batch number here is not mandatory, right? You can put it in, but you don't actually have to. And all the responsibility lies at the end of the approver, whether to approve or disapprove this SDR. So essentially, यहाँ पे आप पूरी responsibility approver को दे रहे हैं कि the approver has to keep track if that particular item was sold, और अगर वो sold हुआ था तो किस quantity में हुआ था. Because obviously if you're returning something, you need to know कि अच्छा ठीक है, I sold this amount, this particular quantity of this SKU, और अब ये वापस आ रहा है तो ये उससे ज़्यादा quantity में तो return नहीं आ रहा, उतना ही है और उससे कम है. So all of these considerations were to be kept in mind by the approver. So इधर human intervention बहुत ज़्यादा थी. That is any person. So if I am supposed to be approving the SDR, I should be searching the invoice manually, finding out कि अच्छा ठीक है if I should actually approve this SDR or not, and then manually entering amounts such as the discounts जो उसके ऊपर लगे थे invoice के time पे, because obviously when you're returning, so if a retailer comes and returns something to you, you're gonna minus the amount of discount जो आपने दिया था at the time of selling, right? You can't give them more money और उससे ज़्यादा जो उन्होंने जिससे ज़्यादा खरीदा था, ठीक है? So all of these things were initially managed by a person who, in our words, is the approver, who's solely responsible कि वो approve करेंगे सारे SDR requests, and he is to take the responsibility of this module. So when we thought about this module, we brainstormed as to what needs to be done. So the first thing that came to our mind was that we need to remove the human intervention out of it, right? So invoice हमारे system से generate होती है. Why not that at the time of return, a person supposed to select the invoice, ठीक है? उसमें जो sold हुए हुए items है, you're supposed to put in amount या quantity of those particular items. वो automatically आपको बता दे कि अच्छा आप over नहीं जा सकते. Let's say if a particular item SKU A 6 वो sold out हुए थे, and if I put in 7 instead return करने में, तो system should reject it, and this shouldn't be on the shoulders of the approver कि वो takes the responsibility of approving or disapproving it, right? So this was the concept behind modification of this stock return module. So I will go on to the module that we've created. Now, as someone mentioned, it is a setting-based module. That is for those users who think that their process is seamless and they do not want to change anything about it. They don't think this is something that is required, even though I feel with proper training, this is something which would be very beneficial and fruitful क्योंकि आपके chances of error are largely minimized. तो ये हमने बनाया setting based module so that everybody can transition from their current system to the new system, and achanak se this isn't something new for them. So in the stock damage return setting, we made a invoice based STR setting. If you enable this particular setting, तो आपके लिए वो advanced version of the SDR module will be applicable, right? So since this, on this particular instance, so on this instance, I did not have the SDR module enabled, advanced SDR module enabled. But for this particular instance, I had this invoice-based SDR module enabled so that I can give you a little bit of feeler as to how the new module will look like. So same process as usual. When you're logging a request from the web, you go onto the stock return ka module. You see आपने अपने system में stock return types बनाए हुए होंगे. You've also created stock return subtypes. Now, assuming that you've made your stock return types and subtypes, you're going to raise a request. ठीक है? Now, जब पिछली बार मैंने आपको दिखाया था कि a comparison कि जब हम इधर request raise करने जा रहे थे, everything needs to be manually entered. Invoice number is not it's not a mandatory field. If you have it, you can put it, even though ये mandatory होना चाहिए. Because any person जिससे अभी भी हम like in a usual life, whenever we buy something and we need to return it, every time we're asked for a receipt, right? It's mandatory. If it's nahi hai wahan pe, we won't get our things returned, or any sort of returning mechanism does not work invoice ke bagair, right? So we said ki theek hai, this is the principle that we're establishing, that every time a person needs to raise a stock return request, we select the distributor, type select karenge, hum distributor select karenge for which we're raising the request. We're going to select a app user, and then we're going to select a store. Let's say जो हमारा पहला store है उसको हमने select कर लिया. Then system जो है हमको fetch करके लाके दे देगा the invoices on this particular store, right? तो हमारे पास ये सारी list of invoices हैं जो कि हमें इस store के ऊपर available हैं. I can जो उस पे कटी होंगी, right? So I can select an invoice और वो क्या करेगा? It'll pre-fill all the SKUs, ठीक है? And the quantities that were ordered at the time of ordering. So invoice में जो आपकी quantity थी of the SKUs that you ordered is displayed on the screen now, right? Initially ये होता था आपको सब कुछ मैनुअली करना है। ये SKUs के इधर आपने SKUs एंटर करने होंगे, इधर आपने टाइप एंटर करनी है, सब टाइप एंटर करनी है, क्वांटिटी भी एंटर करनी है जितनी आपने रिटर्न करनी है। तो इसमें कोई चेक नहीं है कि यू कैन इन दिस पर्टिकुलर फीचर ये चेक नहीं है कि आपकी क्वांटिटी इनवॉइस से ज्यादा तो नहीं है, कम तो नहीं है, इवन इफ कि ये SKUs इनवॉइस में कटा भी था कि नहीं था, दिस इज समथिंग दैट वाज नॉट मेंटेन्ड प्रीवियसली. This is now, and it was completely at the disposal of the approver. This is now catered in this module where you can select the, आपको अपना बस damage type select करना होगा and the subtype, and maybe आपने अगर return करनी है quantity, तो let's say मैंने कहा कि I want to return one of this particular thing, right? I select this and then I add the stock return request. अच्छा, यहाँ पे हमारा हो गया स्टॉक रिटर्न सक्सेसफुली रेज्ड हो गया, राइट? अच्छा, अब इधर मैं आपको बताती हूँ जो हमारा नेक्स्ट स्टेप होता था, इसमें हमारी जो अप्रूवल की स्क्रीन होती थी उसमें दोज ऑफ यू हु यूज द मॉड्यूल वुड रिलेट दैट अ लॉट ऑफ कॉलम्स जो फील्ड्स थी वर टू बी फिल्ड मैनुअली, राइट? सो इफ आई गो एंड सी कि अगर कोई पुराना हो, फॉर मी टू शो यू हाउ the previous version works, right? So ये previous screen है, right? इसमें ना आपने आपके पास वो सारी चीजें आ रही होंगी and you have the approved quantity और value. अच्छा, इसमें आपके जो claimable non claimable promotions होती थी, if this were SKU wise discount, तो there would have been यहाँ पे columns जो आपको खुद fill करने होते थे कि इस पे कितना claimable हमें discount देना है, right? But what we have done in the new module, we say कि आपके invoice पे all of the relevant information regarding the SDR is present, right? So अगर मैं एक approver हूँ तो मुझे essentially मेरी screen पे चाहिए कि all the information that is related to that is to be fetched from the invoice जो जिस पे कट गई है, right? उसके सारे columns जो हैं वो pre-filled होके आए मेरे पास, तो I will go on to the stock approval screen. यहाँ पे मैं एंग्रो MIS का सिलेक्ट करूंगी, I'll select all and I'll select जो मैंने अभी एक SDR क्रिएट किया, राइट? I sent an SDR for one जो पहला मेरा SKU था उसकी एक क्वांटिटी में, ठीक है? इसमें आप देखेंगे कि इसने ना मुझे सारी इंफॉर्मेशन रिलेटेड टू दिस दिखा दी। उसने कहा मेरी टोटल वैल्यू इसकी इतनी है, इसका एडवांस टैक्स इतना है, इसका टैक्स इतना है, इसका डिस्काउंट क्लेमेबल कितना है, विच वाज प्रीवियसली अ कॉलम जिसमें आप खुद एंटर करते थे वैल्यूज। तो अब अप्रूवर का काम इतना ज्यादा आसान हो गया that the approver just has to accept or reject the SDR request, right? Now to prove कि ये जो discount claimable percentage आ रही है जो पहले बंदा manually create करता था, is this really the one that is on the invoice? So for that we'll go on to the invoice, ठीक है? I'll minimize that and I'll open the invoice जो इसी की invoice number है. So this is 149, right? So this is D0002 invoice number 149. I will open a separate tab and I'll open an invoice and see कि इसके जो discounts लगे हैं वो सही हैं कि नहीं, right? So I go here, I search 149 and this is the invoice and I say print invoice, ठीक है? अच्छा, इसमें ना I have all the details, so you can verify कि पहले भी जब when we were logging the SDR we know कि 266 यही 4 SKUs थे, यही उनकी quantity थी जो ordered screen पे आ रही थी. So this can also be verified through the invoice, ठीक है? फिर हमने इनके जो एक item था जो हमारा पहला SKU था वो हमने return किया था. So we will see here that हमारा जो ये वाला SKU है ये हमने return किया हुआ है, सही है, और इसकी ये टोटल आइटम प्राइस आ रही है एंड देन देयर इज आल्सो द इनवॉइस दैट शोस कि अच्छा ये इसकी टोटल इनवॉइस आइटम प्राइस आ रही है दैट इज टू बी रिटर्न. ये नेट अमाउंट है बट हमारा जो है ये नेट अमाउंट है बट हमारा सिंस सारे SKUs रिटर्न नहीं हुए हैं, हमारा सिर्फ एक SKU रिटर्न हुआ था, तो आपकी जो यूनिट प्राइस है वो so 2 units were bought, only one was returned, तो आपकी जो यूनिट प्राइस है और उसके ऊपर जो डिस्काउंट लगा है वो सब्ट्रैक्ट होकर आपका total item price आ रही है. So this is the total item price 80.98 and this was the unit price जिसके ऊपर 0.82 का डिस्काउंट लगा and there is the new price now जो कि आपको रिटर्न करते वक्त मिलेगी. Now इससे हुआ क्या कि all of the process is so smooth and seamless now कि approver has like zero, almost zero chances of error कि वो गलती से कोई ऐसे चीज log कर देगा. Obviously an approver can accept or reject a request जो कि problematic हो सकती है, but there'd be the chances of error as to when he was entering all the values manually अपनी approval screen पे, वो सारे minimize हो गए. And the user will have complete accessibility and visibility as to उसका कौन से amount, कितनी unit price थी, उस पे कितना tax लग रहा था. तो जैसे invoice हमारी बहुत seamless होती है, उसी तरीके से हमारा जो अब distributor का जो return process होगा as to what the approver sees, वो भी entirely seamless होगा, because it's the exact replication, representation of what's happening on the invoice, and nothing needs to be done manually. Everything's being fetched for the user on your behalf, and it's being filled onto the approval screen. So this is it with regards to the SDR, the revamp of the SDR module. Now we can move on to the next.
Thank you, Zoha. For those who have any questions regarding this module, please feel free to type them in the chat window, and we'll be taking the questions at the end of the session. Okay, so moving on to the next part of the demo, that is credit limit revamp. Okay, so in the last two webinars as well, we've been talking about some improvements. In the first webinar, we launched our credit module, and we talked about it in a greater detail of all the policies that you could set on a particular store. And then we then in the following webinar, we talked about some other improvements and an introduction in policies that we introduced in the credit limit module. This time as well, we've slightly made some changes in our credit limit module, which will make it more easy for you guys to use. Let's say, for example, you have 10 stores, and on those 10 stores, you were applying the same kind of credit limit policy. So now you'll be able to activate and deactivate it on a single click. And we've also slightly changed the view of how credit limit will be seen on grid. And there has been also some changes in the download CSV, which we'll also be showing you. So someone will be giving the demo for the credit limit module, and she'll be telling you how to apply a policy and how the view has changed. Okay, so over to you, Saman.
Okay. Yeah. So let me just share my screen.
ये हमारे अकाउंट में एक सेकंड.
Okay. So before directly dig into the specific change that we have made, I would like to recall the credit module that we have previously worked in, and the following and that we have briefed in the following sessions. So let me just give you a little brief about what we have worked on initially and how it's now working. So so if you can see, we took few parameters to define credit limit against any store to restrict their sales on basis of certain parameters, where those are based on amount, based on number of days and number of bills. Those who are using this module right now, who can relate to this, these are some of very powerful feature that helps you in limit your sales as a perspective that you can also recover your amount from the market, right? So this is something that this is a module that we are continuously working on. So while using this module, we have picked some of the structural changes that we have realized that we should have to work on. So before that, if you have noticed, if you select multiple stores into a credit limit policy, it's become very difficult for you to edit a policy one by one, or to inactive, or to make changes in any of the policy by going in each and every policy one by one. So what we are doing at this time is, so we have tried to consolidate all the stores that you have selected while defining the policy. We tried to consolidate all those stores at one place against that specific policy, and to give you that view on when you try to edit those policies as well. So we have bring in the concept of child and parent over there, right? So let me just show you how it works. So actually the implementation part will remain same. It give you more ease or privilege to define your policy in a very consolidated way, and to give you ease it will reduce your time to define a policy. Okay, so this is distributor. And we have also introduced some of the filters over there to filter the stores to target the direct stores that you want to. So let me just select all stores over there. So yeah. So if you see, I am selecting multiple stores over there. So I've selected 3 stores, and here I would define only amount limit based on amount for now, so that we can make changes on edit mode. Apply filter, and I'm not applying per bit limit right now. So it will also tell you if you have already defined limit against any other store. So it will tell you that you have already defined limit for that particular store. It won't allow you to define limit for that store for this time. Okay. See, it says record has been already added. If I go and view this policy, it will show all its selected stores inside this policy. If I go and wanted to change this policy due to any reason, so the view will look something like that. So if you noticed, while creating policy, I have only select amount that time. So it won't allow me to edit days in that particular policy until and unless I select those I allow those types or attributes from the above filters, right? Let's suppose if I select number of days over there, and along with this number of bills over there, and apply filters, so now it will allow me to define to edit this to add number of days or bills into this policy, right? So let me just put in values over there. 2 days, number of bills, for example, I'm defining, assume 2 number of days over there. Here, there's an option of include and exclude available. So assume if you have already defined a policy of type amount over there, and you don't want it to allow this thing, and you just want to include or exclude any stores from that policy. So what you could do, you can exclude, you can just go into this drop down and exclude that store from that policy. So if you have noticed, you have we have made changes into the policy, but this button is not yet active. So this functionality has been made to ensure that whatever changes you have made should be applied before you finally commit this policy, right? So if I click on apply button, so this option is available for individual application and for all. Let me just apply those buttons. So now system allows me to finally edit or save this policy. So yeah, once I save, so whatever the changes I made are reflecting over there, which means, so instead of going in every store one by one now I can edit this policy by going into the parent part of the policy, which is the main policies, policy number CL0001, and I can update all its stores over there, right? So before this, what I had to do is, if I have created a policy for assume for 10 stores or 15 stores, what I had to do, I have to go in every store one by one to update that store or to include that store or to an active policy for against that store. So now from onwards, you'll be able to do all those steps at one by editing a single policy, right? So let me just show you a little demonstration over invoice engine for this policy. So I have entered the amount of 10. Let me just edit this policy to actually meet the requirement of my order. So I'm editing it to, sorry. Okay, if you see, I have excluded one of the store that has now removed from this policy, right? So let me just add one more store over there that I'll be using for my order bouquet. And apply this into the policy, and finally I'm editing this policy. Okay, this policy is now saved. So if I go and see, so this store has now been added with the policy with the amount of limit 10,000. Okay, so I'll just go on to my booking screen. So I've already placed an order just for the sake of saving time. So this is the order that I have placed against the same distributor and same store, which is Astra store, on whose delivery date is June 10th, right? So with number of units 10. If you see this amount, so let me. So amount is still more than the amount of my policy. Okay. If I go and allocate this, I think there is something related to price. So see, it shows limit exceeded over there because I have defined the limit of 10,000 rupees against that store, right? So this is something that is already working. We haven't made any changes over there. So just to recall, I've explained this again. So the major change that we have made is at actually at the creation and edit part of the policy. Okay, so Saman, that's it from my side.
Thank you, Saman. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay. So moving on to our third feature, web feature that we'll be talking about is dynamic SKU tagging. So if you've been using Salesflo and you've been setting up your master data and using all kinds of attributes, then you must know that we've got 4 kinds of static attributes, that is variance, price point, pack type, and pack size. But this time we've introduced a new SKU tag that you can dynamically set up, and you can label it whatever you want. So let's say you've got powder or liquid segregation, and you can use it. Use that tag, and you can segregate all your SKUs, and then you can use this SKUs for reporting purposes as well. Okay. So this for this, Zoha will be giving the demo, and I'll hand over the session to Zoha. So over to you.
Thank you so much. I'll be sharing my screen now. Okay. So, right. So as someone mentioned that previously we had a few attributes for an SKU. So attributes are essentially classifications for SKU that we've already created in the system for you to use. You can define your SKU based on these attributes. So you can use variants, you can use price point, pack size, pack type. There's something called price levels for all the users. So these are something that are standard for all the clients, for all the users that are using the product hierarchy. It essentially is used to map your SKU against a particular classifier, right? So you say, I have different types of SKU and I want to create groupings within them. Since there's a product hierarchy that is limited, for example, that you have a manufacturer, you have a business unit under the manufacturer, you have a category, brand, the master SKU, and the SKU. But there's so many other things that are to be taken in consideration when you're making an SKU, because there are different types of SKU based on their pack sizes, their pack types, their segregation as to what form they come in, right? For example, are they powder, are they liquid? So any sort of classification is not being measured in the system currently. So we've catered all the other attributes that can possibly be required for classifying a SKU in a particular category. For example, specifying its variant, their price point, pack size, etc. But anything that's custom to a particular company, right? For example, if you are a company that sells powder goods as well as liquid goods, you would want to have a segregation, a broader classifier that would put your SKU into those categories. So for this, we've thought about a solution that would work for all. For example, if a client comes up to us and says, we want a particular segregation and this is what the segregation should be called, instead of doing that for that particular client, what we thought would be better for the product and for the scalability of the product was to make a dynamic feature through which you could tag SKUs, and you can essentially mark your SKUs, segregate them, classify them as however you want. And that the name of the classifier itself would be according to your own preference. So I'll show you how you do that. Let's go into the system settings where we have the SKU attribute settings. We will go on to finding the SKU attribute setting. So these are different settings. Currently, some of them are applicable to the application, some of them are applicable to the mobile application, some of them are applicable to the web application. So this extra attribute is something that we've created for all the clients. This is something, this is a very generic name for a particular attribute that can be used for you. Let's say if you want to call it a category or anything. So the name is up to you, the alias that you can set as to how you want to bifurcate your SKUs. So you would save that, you would go into the product, and you will see it as an attribute there, right? So I go on to SKUs and I'll see there is a classifier here that I just created. I can create different categories. For example, let's say I want to create a powder liquid segregation between my products, or like a snack spice segregation, which cannot be catered into the product hierarchy. So obviously broader categories are something that are covered within the product hierarchy. So I'll define my business units, my categories, but there's certain segregations that are, for example, based on flavors. I want to make a chocolate segregation and a strawberry segregation. That is something that I want to make not part of my product hierarchy, but that is something which is my SKUs attribute, and I would eventually want to use that segregation in reports. For example, I would want to, if my SKUs are grouped together or flagged together as a particular type, let's say powder, let's say chocolate, let's say strawberry, I would want to see their sales in a particular. So we essentially are making a metric for you to track your KPIs better, right? So the more granularly your SKUs are tagged and the more better they're classified into categories, the more granularly you can get results as to how well your SKU is doing, or any information specific to the SKU, right? So once you've created the different classifications, you can tag these classifications onto the SKU. So I go to SKUs again, and I, let's say, edit an SKU, and I should be able to tag a particular classification to a certain SKU. So I'll find a classifier, and have the drop down will have all the things that I created. So you could see the powder classification that I created, and I can save it on this SKU, which again will help me mark my SKU as a particular type, as a particular group. That will help me with my reports or my analysis if I want to conduct any. So this feature essentially gives the user more autonomy as to the granularity they want to define their SKU over. And we personally feel it'll be since it's a dynamic feature, you can define it how you want. It'll be a very helpful feature, and you won't have to ask us or the team to add this for you particularly, and you'll be able to do that from the front end. And if you want to map your SKUs to a particular category, you wouldn't ask us to make a field for you to tag your SKUs. You'd just use this particular feature and map your SKUs against the classifiers. So this is it about this feature, and I'll hand it over to Saman.
Thank you, Zoha. Okay, let me share my screen again. Okay. So moving on to the next part of our agenda is that we'll be talking about mobile application features that we've worked on. I was just going through the questions. There was a popular request, and there were questions regarding invoice-based SDRs for mobile applications. So we'll be talking about that in very detail, how that particular feature will be working. We've also given clearer history for SDR replacements. And then we've also given a brand-wise order summary. So all these features, Ali will be talking about in greater detail, and will show you exactly how these work. So over to you, Ali, for the mobile application demo.
Thank you, Saman. Okay, so we can start off with invoice-based SDR. So you will now have to get this turned on from your Salesflo admin, whoever your point of contact is. And once it is on, you just long press on the store again, go to damage returns, add a new SKU. And then over here, you can now see that the third field is of invoice number. So as you normally would do, you add the reason and sub-reason. Now, when you tap on invoice number, this part will already be pre-filled, right, according to the distribution and the invoice code, after which the order booker will just have to add in the invoice number accordingly, choose their quantity, and then take their picture as they would normally do so, and submit. So now this SDR has been placed according to the invoice number. So that is the first feature we are introducing. Second, if you long press on the store, you will now see that there's a new option for SDR rejection history. So when you tap on that, you will see this page, which provides you with the SDR date when it was raised, the SKU description, and lastly, the rejection reason. So as you can see over here, the first few are SKUs not associated to the invoice, but as you can see, the last one is invoice does not exist. So we can just do this long press, select another store, and you can see the SDR based history for different stores. Right? And then lastly, we can enter a store and start to service it. So as we usually do, we take GPS and then we take another picture at this, and then you go to your SKUs and start adding SKUs from different brands. So if I select one SKU from here, one SKU from here, and perhaps another SKU from here. And once we have added our SKUs, we can click proceed and then click on view order summary at the top. Once we click that, we get a breakup of the SKUs we've selected. And if you go to the brand section, you'll be able to see that now you will be seeing subtotals for different brands and then a grand total after all the taxes have been added. So these are the 3 new features that we are going to be releasing in this new app release. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Okay. So moving ahead. Yeah. So the last part is that we'll be talking about system improvements. That is the minor improvements that we've done. Okay, so talking about some system improvements is that if you guys are using our asset scanning module, you must know that asset scanning is not compulsory at a particular store and it can be set as an optional field. So we've worked on a setting where asset scanning will now become mandatory, and the app user has to scan an asset and then only he can move forward by servicing that store. Okay. Then the second thing that we've worked on is build history based on distribution for shop history. So previously, if this is something that we received this feedback from the market as well once we went on our market visits, and we saw that order bookers were able to see bill history for stores that they weren't actually servicing. So they were giving you the overall distribution performance. Okay. So this time what we've done is that any order booker that has been servicing some particular stores, only bill history for those particular stores are visible in that order booker's application. Okay. And then we've also, so the third point is distributor wise asset scanning. So we've made a setting for distributor wise asset scanning, whether you want to allow your distributions to scan assets or not. So this is a distributor based setting and can be turned on and off accordingly. Okay. So this was about it for the system improvements, and moving on, just to give you guys an idea of how our 5th July, 5th August, and then 5th September pipeline looks like. Now these are part of our innovation pipeline, these features, but these are subject to change as well. So you guys have to stay tuned to look what's coming in July. And we'll be having a similar session over there in July, and then we'll be talking about more features that we work on. Okay, so guys, that was it in terms of the demonstration, the feature set that we wanted to talk about, and now we'll be happy to take any questions that you guys have. Yeah. Okay, so we had a lot of questions during the session, so I'll be announcing them here as well, so that everyone else who has similar queries are also clear. When we select the invoice on stock return, which invoice comes on SDR module, before return or after the return? Before the return or after the return? These are before return, because when you're raising an SDR, all those invoices that have been settled in the system will be coming in the drop down. Zoha, if you can add in as well. Okay, then the next question is, what if we have quantity of stock to no, the invoice selection is single select. For any other invoice, you will have to raise another SDR. Can we use both SDR settings simultaneously? I'm afraid you cannot. Only a single SDR setting. Either you want SDR to be entered manually or automatically. You can't use them both simultaneously. The reason being is that if you select an invoice, let's say you chose invoice number 1 for an SDR return, there will be some specific SKUs that will be present in that invoice, right? And now if you want to add in some other SKU, that won't be part of that invoice, so you won't be able to match and validate them. That's why it's either you set them manually or automatically. Same SKU expiry date which serve to two retailers and different invoices. Then you will have to raise two different SDRs with two different invoices. Okay, and can we set approval levels in SDR module like claims? For now, we don't have. We just have a single level of approval settings, but we might be working on it at some later stage. So we'll update you guys accordingly. Can we enter SDR in mobile? Yes, we just gave you the demo of how SDR can be entered through mobile application against invoice. And we show list of invoices. Okay, so Athar, by showing the list of invoices, we'll have to, so we researched on it, and it will become a very long list of invoices if we start giving it in our mobile application. Since let's say an order booker services a store twice in a month, and then if we start giving history of let's say 4 months, then it'll be a huge number for every store. And let's say if he services 20 stores in a particular day, then the quantum of invoices will be quite a lot. That's why we haven't given a list of invoices in the mobile application. And what if I add invoice number at the time of SDR? You have to enter the invoice number against which the SDR is being returned. Okay, can we set restriction of credit limit at the time of load? Okay, so you can share your use cases with us, but basically stock allocation is the first barrier. That's why we've implemented it at stock allocation, and then later when you're settling in your load form, then that is checked as well. But stock allocation is the first step. So because we can't stop sales, so you can just be notified. It's you don't need to block those sales. You can simply set up a notification criteria. You can make a notification policy, and it won't block your sales. Block your sales is when you choose your policy to block the sales. Okay. Can we show settlement? Can you show settlement on invoice? Can we add a date filter? Yusuf, I'm not clear on your question. Where settlement amount on invoice? And Athar, you're asking for a date filter. Are you talking about the SDR wise? For that, then because if the application will start searching, then we will have to make it an online application rather than an offline one, because then the quantum of the data will still be quite a lot if we want offline searching to take place. So that's why we basically shortlisted we noted down a lot of options, and this was the best that we've selected. So, but if you still have any suggestions how we can optimize it further, where we can connect with you, and then we can also understand your challenges. Okay, so do we have any other questions? Okay. So we're getting no further questions. So guys, with that, we conclude our session, and I thank you all for taking out the time and joining this webinar. And you know, it really makes us feel good as well that our customers are joining in, and they're asking questions. They're really interested in the features that we make. And your feedback really matters. So we'll also be circulating a survey afterwards. Okay, I'm getting questions. Wait. When settlement of SDR amount, or can I say settlement amount on invoice? Settlement of SDR. Yes, we are working on that settlement on invoice on the next invoice, and we will be announcing that feature soon too. Can you please arrange? Acha, I'd like to know which customer you are, so that we can you know, ask someone to contact you. No. Okay, we can, if you can email us about this, then we'll get back to you. I'm not actually getting your question. Okay. So with that, if we have no further questions, let's conclude the session. And thank you guys for taking out the time and joining us once again. And we hope that in the next session, we bring in some more interesting and value-added features for you. So yeah, stay tuned. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you.